Hello, my name is Angelika Pixa. I work for the Social Welfare Center in Żory as a coordinator of family foster care. Together with Patrycja Cyrych, who also works as a coordinator and is a professional psychologist, we would like to present to you the issue of trauma experienced by children placed in foster care.
Let's present what trauma is. According to the definition contained in DSM-IV diagnostic criteria, trauma is a life-threatening situation that evokes strong emotional reactions. Lifton defines trauma as a situation in which a person experiences a breach in the continuity of life, and according to Garis, Fisher, and Riedesser theory, trauma is experiencing a dramatic difference between a threatening situation and the possibility of coping with a simultaneous feeling of helplessness and abandonment that result in a change in perception of oneself and of the world. So, generally speaking, trauma is a negative experience accompanied by a feeling of helplessness, inability to cope with the event, and in the long run, causes strong negative emotional reactions. Placement in a foster family is undoubtedly a difficult event in the life of a child. Each separation of a child from its family environment is a traumatic event for the child. Therefore, it is very important to properly carry out the procedure of collecting a child, to know the psychological mechanism of a trauma and ways to mitigate it, and to be able to talk emphatically with other person, both the biological parent and the child itself. Angelika, maybe you can tell us how the procedure of placing a child should proceed.
Let us start with the fact that the whole process of placing a child in foster care begins with issuing a decision by the family court to secure the child. After receiving this document, foster care workers make every effort to find a candidate for a foster family in the child's family environment. For the purpose, interviews with candidates are conducted. In particular, we focus on the immediate family, that is, grandparents, adult siblings, uncles, and aunts. Only where there are no person among the closest relatives who can take care of the child, we look for candidates who have declared their willingness to act as foster families in the center. Usually, these are non-professional foster families, professional foster families, and family foster homes. The last resort for us is placing minors in institutional foster care, the so-called children's homes. When we find a candidate for a foster family, we visit the biological family with the court decision. We try to talk to the parents in a calm, rational way, and we provide all information about the family where the child is being secured. We inform parents that they have the right to make a complaint against the court order and provide assistance in writing it. During each pickup, we make every effort to ensure that the whole procedure affects the child as little as possible. We avoid arguments and we never take the child by force from the home. Our main message to the biological parents is to transfer the child to a foster family in an agreeable manner. If they do not agree, the center's employees notify the court, which orders a professional probation officer to carry out the pickup, usually accompanied by the police. We repeatedly tell parents that guardianship removal is associated with stronger negative emotions and greater trauma for the child. So-called intervention child protection may also be a strongly traumatic experience for the child. This is a form of securing a child by police officers. For example, the police receive a call to domestic violence. At the scene, it turns out that both guardians are drunk and there is no other family members who can provide care for the child. As a result, the minor child is placed in the family emergency room and the court is informed, which makes further decisions on the child custody order.
It is important to remember that the more sudden and unexpected the child pickup, the more likely it is to provoke stronger negative emotions. It is more difficult to cope with them and to understand the situation. For example, if you find out that you need an operation, you have time to prepare for it and plan your next steps. Trauma, on the other hand, is impossible to prepare for as it occurs suddenly and unexpectedly. Our body does not have time to analyze and react properly. Self preservation takes the place of rational decisions. Therefore, when dealing with the issues of trauma, workers must do their best. During the collection of a child, each person involved in the whole procedure must be careful in making decisions, should have the ability to control their own emotions, and if possible, give the child and the biological parents time to accept the situation. It is also important not to surround the family and the child during the whole procedure. The fewer people participating in the child's reception, the better. Too many people involved in the cause more stress, anxiety, and frustration for both parents and the child.
Yes, you are right. That is why in our center we practice to have a maximum of 2 staff members involved in the pickup procedure. One person focuses on talking to the parent and the other focuses on talking to the child. We try to do our best to make the procedure of placing a child in foster care go positively both in the opinion of the child, the biological parents, and the foster parents. Unfortunately, transferring a child is still a difficult issue for us because as employees we have neither the possibility nor the right to transport the child. We try not to involve police officers in the transportation of the child, as the very presence of the police is stressful for the child. Medical transport is also possible, but we don't always know when we will pick up the child, so we don't have the possibility to order such transport in advance.
There is a very important issue here, which is how to tell the child that he or she is going. It is important to be honest with the child. If a parent is not able to talk to the child at the moment because they have very strong negative emotions, the worker will talk to the child in the presence of the parent. We inform the child where he or she is going and openly indicate that we do not know for what period. Every lie told to the child at this point may negatively influence the process of adaptation in the foster family. During the conversation with the child, it is also worth building a positive image of the foster family, telling about its functioning, ways of spending everyday life, and the place where it lives. The key role during the interview is played by the biological parents, who have the greatest influence on the emotional state of the child. Their consent to go to a foster family, addressing the foster parents as auntie or uncle, and amicably handing over the child, will have a positive impact on the whole process.
Unfortunately, our experience shows that parents are not always able to control their own emotions. They often explode with anger, rage, they cry. Moreover, not knowing the foster family, they speak negatively about them in the presence of the child. It should be stressed again that the consent of the biological parent has a positive effect on the adaptation of the child in the foster family. The cooperation between the biological parents and the foster family is crucial for the proper development of the child, as well as for the quick and positive overcoming of the trauma. It should be also mentioned that the procedure for collecting a child is a difficult moment not only for the family and the child. Each time a child has to be placed in foster care, it also indirectly affects the staff.
The duration of the trauma is also an important issue. There are children who can adapt quickly and correctly in the foster family, and there are those who, as a result of separation from the parents, will repress the foster family and will rebel against it. When considering the concept of trauma, it is important to remember that it can take two different forms. The first form is short term trauma, which appears suddenly, immediately after the event, but disappears over time. Short term trauma occurs when the child recovery is gentle, patient, and when the biological parents try not to project their own emotions onto the child and support the child in the adaptation process. A child who has experienced short term trauma adapts more quickly to the new environment and accepts new carers. The second form is a long term trauma, which we refer to when stress and negative emotions that the child experiences during the traumatic event persists for a long time. The intensity does not decrease and they often recur and are repeated. The result of long term trauma is low self esteem, lack of ability to acquire the necessity competencies of life, distorted image of reality, all of which in turn causes disharmonious development of the child and may result in post traumatic stress, also called PTSS. The form of trauma experience, that is, how a child will cope with being placed in a foster family, depends on the child's age, level of emotional development, psychological maturity, understanding of the situation, access to information about his or her own situation, and maintaining contact with the biological family. It is not only placement itself that is traumatic, but also the separation from important people, the environment, and material possessions. It can even mean loss of health and self esteem. I remember a young girl who had experienced a lot of bad things in her family home, including violence. When talking about herself and her memories, the girl often pointed out that the most painful thing for her was the separation from her dogs, which she could not take with her to her foster family.
It should be remembered that children are placed in foster care only as a last resort when all forms of support and help to their families have not brought the desired result. These children often have a huge baggage of negative experiences.
I zdarza się, tak jak w przypadku dziewczyn, że traktują rodzicielstwo zastępcze jako klucz do poprawy własnego życia.
Patricia, tell us, how will foster parents know that a child is experiencing trauma? Are there any signals indicating this, something to look out for?
Foster parents should pay attention if negative emotions such as sadness, anger, helplessness, and fear accompany the child when talking about unpleasant events and memories. Mood swings can also occur. In addition, recurrent nightmares and insomnia are common. In bad dreams, there is usually a recreation of the traumatic event. This is related to the storage of memories of the trauma. These sensations can cause excessive sweating and accelerated heart rate. This is the body's defense. Another phenomenon is called flashback. This is a situation that is sudden and real re-experiencing of the trauma accompanied by very strong emotions that can make the person feel as if they experienced the traumatic event again. Flashback can even lead to loss of consciousness. Next, it is worth noting the numbing and avoidance reaction that accompany the reenactment of negative memories. In addition, in the behavior of traumatized children, we can observe irritability and outbursts of anger, concentration, and attention disorder. Trauma survivors also often become overly vigilant and overly concerned and worried about their own safety and that of their loved ones.
The social functioning of children after placement in foster care is also an important issue. The foster family, the biological family, and we, support workers, have the task of supporting the child's further development. Patricia, maybe you can tell us how to help a child work through the trauma of being in foster care.
Certainly, the consent of the biological parent to accept new guardians, the atmosphere during reception, and the general way in which it is carried out have a great influence. At the same time, the most important thing after placement is to provide the child with a sense of security, stability, to talk about the child's emotions, fears, and doubts in an accepting manner. However, it is important to remember that the child should be given space and caregivers should show patience and understanding in the process of experiencing trauma. Putting too much emphasis on talking to your child about their emotions can cause them to shut down and avoid talking altogether. Specialist support can also help, for example, using a psychologist or psychotherapist to allow the child to open up in a safe and unbiased environment. It is worth adding that with younger children, the difficult period is between 8 and 9 months of age, because this is when separation anxiety occurs. Every time a child is placed in foster care, the bond with the carers is broken, which can lead to reactive attachment disorder, the so called RAD. This is a problem with building and maintaining close and satisfying bonds, both with peers and adults, especially caregivers. The relationship between the foster family and the biological family plays a key role here. Regular maintaining between children and the biological parents, consistent implementation. According to John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory, it will not be possible to develop a proper attachment between a child and a carer if the interaction occurs late, that is, after the child is 2.5 years old. The author of the theory of attachment points out that children who have not established a proper relationship by the age of 2 develop an emotionless character characterized by inability to form attachments to anyone. However, contemporary research on the subject show that children who have not had the opportunity to form proper bonds with the caregivers, or those who have had their bonds interrupted with the opportunity to build them back again and properly, there have been 2 major research projects related to the topic. The first project was led by Tizard and concerned a group of children who, from the first day of life, were living in different orphanages and were treated impersonally due to the constantly changing staff, with the result that they were unable to form attachment to any adult. The children in this group were then adopted well beyond infancy, some as the young of 7 years old. The second project involved a group of orphans who also spent the early years in institutions that severely prevented social development and when then adopted between the age of 8 months and 5.5 years. Both studies show that later adoption did not result in the complete inability to develop attachment. In most cases, the children exhibited behaviors indicative of genuine affection towards their new families and displayed properly formed emotional bonds. Therefore, it can be concluded that there is no critical point, and thus every child, despite the trauma suffered, the broken ties, thanks to the new correct support of adults, will be able to trust another person again.
The subject of trauma, its prevention, and also the treatment of trauma is very difficult. Trauma has to be dealt with individually, taking into account the experiences of the person in question. We hope that in this short film we have illustrated this topic comprehensively. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch our material. We hope that it will be helpful for you both in your work with trauma and in determining the procedure for placing a child in foster care. We hope that despite difficulties and adversity, every child will come to their own happiness and go through life with a sense of security and satisfaction. We wish everyone to be able to find a ray of sunshine in the difficult twists and turns of life.